The alert came at the worst possible time. Grand Admiral Sarah Khan was in the middle of a formal dinner with 3 senators in the High Commander's wing of the Western Fleet when his personal communicator buzzed against his wrist. He ignored it the first time. He ignored it the second time. When it buzzed a third time in less than a minute, he finally excused himself from the table. Without another word, he stepped out onto the wide marble balcony of the Imperial Palace and answered the call. The voice on the other end belonged to his night watch officer, a young man named Corbin. And the voice was shaking. That was the first sign something was very wrong. Corbin had been working the night desk for 11 years. Sarah Khan had never heard him sound nervous before. "Admiral," Corbin said, trying to steady his voice. "We've lost contact with Border Patrol Cruiser 794. Last known position, the Outer Vale sector. The final transmission came in 12 minutes ago." He paused. "Sir, you need to see what they sent." Khan stood silently on the balcony and looked out over the lights of Velkara, the throne world of the Dominion Empire. The planet stretched endlessly beneath him, towers of white stone and blue glass reaching into the night sky. The glow of 10 million lights reflected off low clouds, and the distant hum of a city that never truly slept drifted through the air. Velkara was the most powerful planet in 14,000 star systems. It had not been threatened in 600 years. "Send it to my personal screen," Khan said calmly. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." He arrived in 12. The Imperial Fleet Command Center sat deep beneath the palace, carved directly into the bedrock of the planet itself. It was a vast circular chamber filled with holographic displays, rows of analysts at glowing stations, and the constant quiet murmur of data flowing in from every corner of the Dominion's territory. Sarah Khan had spent more of his life in this room than anywhere else. He knew every light on every panel. He knew the difference between a routine alert and a serious one simply by the color of the indicators. Tonight, the indicators were a color he had not seen in a very long time. Red. Deep, solid red. Not the flashing red of a minor emergency, but the steady, silent red of something that had already happened and could not be undone. Corbin met him at the door and led him directly to the central display without saying a word. Around the room, analysts had gone quiet. Not completely silent, but close enough that every movement felt tense. They were all watching him. That was another bad sign. The image on the central display was grainy and broken, clearly captured in a hurry. It had been pulled from the border cruiser's external sensor array during the final seconds before transmission was lost. Parts of it were blurred by static. Parts of it were missing entirely, replaced by dark blocks where the data had been corrupted. But enough remained. Sarah Khan studied the image for a long moment without speaking. It was a ship. That much was clear. But it was unlike any ship he had seen in 40 years of naval service. It was enormous. Sensor comparison markers placed it at nearly twice the length of a Dominion heavy dreadnought, the largest class of vessel in the Imperial fleet. But it wasn't just the size that made Khan uneasy. It was the shape. Every spacefaring civilization the Dominion had ever encountered built ships that were smooth and curved, elegant, almost aerodynamic in form, even when aerodynamics meant nothing in the vacuum of space. It was simply what intelligent minds tended toward. Clean lines. Graceful shapes. Ships that looked like they belonged among the stars. This thing looked like it had been built to survive them. Its hull was angular and brutal. Hard edges, flat armor plates, sharp corners. The metal was dark, not painted dark, but dark the way old iron becomes dark after passing through countless fires. The surface was scarred, burned, marked with layers of damage and repair so numerous that the repairs themselves had become part of the hull. Long grooves ran along its sides, the unmistakable marks of weapons that had struck it but failed to destroy it. Some armor plates were clearly replacements. Others were centuries old. The mismatched metals formed a patchwork pattern that somehow made the ship look even more dangerous. Like a predator that had survived too many battles to count. The vessel was moving. Even in the still image, sensor data showed velocity markers that made Khan's jaw tighten. It was traveling at a speed that should have been impossible for something that size. And it was heading inward, toward populated space. Near the lower section of the hull, barely visible beneath grime and battle damage, There were markings carved deep into the metal. Unknown characters. A language no one recognized. Has anyone been able to read that? Khan asked quietly. We sent it to the Xenolinguistics division as soon as we received the transmission, Corbin replied. They're working on it now. Khan nodded once. What destroyed the cruiser? Corbin hesitated. We don't know that it was destroyed, sir. Khan turned slowly toward him. There was no explosion recorded, Corbin continued. No debris field. No energy spike. The transmission simply stopped. The ship went silent. Khan looked back at the image. What was the crew complement? 240. No one in the room spoke after that. The Xenolinguistics team worked through the night. They were a small division, mostly academics who had been folded into Imperial intelligence during the Dominion's expansion. Their usual work involved studying ancient ruins, translating fragments of extinct languages, and analyzing artifacts recovered from dead civilizations. They were used to quiet research. They were not used to being woken at midnight and told to decipher something under urgent military priority. But they worked. And just before dawn began to brighten the skyline of Velkara, a senior linguist named Dacer made a discovery that made her freeze in her chair. The script carved into the ship's hull was not in any active database. That was expected. But it wasn't completely unknown either. Dacer ran the characters through every archive the Dominion possessed, including the deep archives where forgotten data went to collect dust. And she found a match. Not a full one. Just a partial. 3 characters. But the match came from a report filed 312 years ago. The report described a long-range exploration probe sent far beyond Dominion borders to study a small satellite galaxy orbiting the edge of known space. The probe had detected unusual energy signatures and photographed fragments of debris from what appeared to have been an ancient interstellar conflict. Among that debris were pieces of hull plating. Before the probe itself was destroyed by fast-moving wreckage, it transmitted images of those fragments back to the Dominion. Those images had been archived. And then forgotten. For 3 centuries. But the characters etched into those ancient hull fragments matched 3 of the symbols on the unknown ship. Exactly. Dacer stared at the comparison results for several long seconds before typing her report. She verified the match 3 times. She was a careful person. She didn't want to cause panic over a coincidence. But this wasn't a coincidence. The script was too specific. Too consistent. Whatever had existed in that distant satellite galaxy 300 years ago, and whatever was now racing through the outer veil at impossible speed, came from the same place. Her translation algorithms managed to process one small fragment of the inscription. 4 characters. 1 incomplete word. UNSC. She didn't know what it meant. Her algorithms didn't know either. But it was a name. Or at least part of one. And now that name had a face. A massive, scarred, fast-moving face that had just silenced a 240-person border cruiser without leaving so much as a debris field behind. Dacer sent her report to the Admiral's office and stood up slowly. Then she walked to the break room to make herself a cup of something hot. Because she had a feeling this was going to be a very long day. Grand Admiral Sarah Khan read the report twice. Then he called in his senior staff. By mid-morning, the entire upper command of the Imperial fleet had gathered in the main briefing chamber beneath the palace. Maps covered the walls. The image of the unknown vessel filled the central display, enlarged and enhanced as much as the damaged data allowed. It didn't look any less terrifying at a larger size. Khan stood at the head of the table and summarized everything they knew. Which, unfortunately, was very little. Unknown vessel. Unknown origin. Possible connection to a distant satellite galaxy. Size and speed beyond current Dominion capability. A border cruiser silenced without debris. And a trajectory leading directly toward inhabited space. At its current velocity, the vessel would reach the first populated system in the Veil Corridor in 3 days. Khan folded his hands behind his back. Recommendations. The room quickly filled with voices. Suggestions ranged from immediate diplomatic contact, proposed by exactly one person, a young intelligence officer named Vel, to full military interception. Most of the officers strongly favored the military response. The diplomatic option died quickly. The military option won. Decisively, Khan authorized the deployment of Battle Group Harris. 40 warships, 6 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers. The rest a mix of combat frigates and support vessels. It was a serious force. This fleet had crushed pirate armadas. It had pacified rebellious systems. It had defeated the navies of entire civilizations that had made the mistake of challenging the Dominion. 40 ships. Against 1. The math seemed reasonable. The math seemed overwhelmingly in the Dominion's favor. But as Sarah Khan stared once more at the image of the scarred black vessel, he couldn't shake the quiet feeling that the numbers might not matter at all. Fleet Admiral Harris himself took command of the battle group. He was a hard man, experienced, decorated, and carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had never lost a major engagement. When he reviewed the sensor image of the unknown vessel, he did so with the calm detachment of a professional soldier. Yes, the ship was enormous. But large ships always had weaknesses. Targeting systems, power distribution nodes, engine sections, shield emitters. Every warship ever built had vulnerable points. And Harris had absolute faith that his weapons officers would find them. Within hours, the fleet departed. 40 warships formed up around Harris's flagship in flawless formation, engines blazing as the pride of the Imperial fleet cut through the darkness toward the outer veil. The Dominion Empire had a very long history. 6,000 years of recorded expansion, conquest, diplomacy, and war. During that time, it had encountered 43 different spacefaring civilizations. 31 had eventually been absorbed into the Empire, some through diplomacy, others through overwhelming force. 9 had been destroyed outright when they proved too dangerous to leave alive. 3 remained beyond the borders of Dominion space, locked in uneasy truces enforced by the threat of the Imperial fleet. But among those 43 civilizations, not one had ever truly made the Dominion afraid. Uncomfortable sometimes, cautious occasionally, but never afraid. The Dominion was simply too vast, too ancient, and too powerful to fear anything it had yet encountered. That was about to change. 3 days after Battle Group Harris departed Velkara, the long-range communications network detected a brief burst transmission from the Veil corridor. It lasted less than 4 seconds. The signal was heavily fragmented. Analysts worked for nearly an hour before reconstructing enough of the data to understand what it contained. It was not a battle report. It was not a tactical update. It was not a message from Admiral Harris. It was a distress beacon. An automated emergency signal that activated when a ship's main systems were destroyed, but its emergency core remained functional. Just one beacon. Out of 40 ships. Grand Admiral Sarah Khan was in his office when the report arrived. He did not react visibly. Over decades of command, he had trained himself not to show fear. A Grand Admiral who looked afraid made everyone else afraid, and frightened people made poor decisions. So he sat perfectly still. He looked down at the report on his desk. He breathed slowly, and he said nothing for nearly a full minute. Then he quietly asked for the xenolinguistics report again. The one containing the 4-character fragment. He read it carefully, as if hoping there might be something he had missed before. There wasn't. It was the same report. 4 characters. No confirmed meaning. A connection to a forgotten probe mission 3 centuries old. And now, a ship that had just destroyed 40 Dominion warships and kept moving. Khan set the report aside. He looked at the star map on his wall, the vast territory of the Dominion Empire stretching across 14,000 star systems. The greatest power the galaxy had ever seen. Then his eyes shifted to a small marker blinking quietly near the edge of the map. The last known position of the unknown vessel. Still moving. Still heading inward. Toward populated space. Khan thought back to something the young intelligence officer Vel had said during the briefing. Something everyone in the room had dismissed. What if they're not here to conquer? What if they're here for something else entirely? No one had answered that question. No one had thought it was worth answering. But Sarah Khan was beginning to think it might have been the most important question anyone had asked. He called for his senior staff again. When the officers entered and saw his face, the room fell silent almost immediately. Because this time, perhaps for the first time in anyone's memory, the Grand Admiral of the Imperial Fleet looked like a man who was no longer entirely certain what to do next. Outside the palace, above the towers and lights of Velkara, the night sky was clear and filled with stars. Somewhere out there, beyond those stars, something old and scarred and very far from home was still moving. Still heading inward. Still, so far, completely unchallenged. And in the wreckage of 40 shattered Imperial warships drifting through the darkness of the outer veil, a single automated beacon continued to blink. One beacon. One survivor. And no one yet knew what that survivor had seen. Her name was Vina. She had been a sensor officer in the Imperial Fleet for 3 years. She was only 22. She had joined the Navy because she was good with numbers, and because her father had served before her. Mostly, she had simply wanted to see more of the galaxy than the small agricultural world where she had grown up. She had expected routine patrol routes, border surveys, maybe the occasional anti-piracy operation if she was unlucky. She had not expected this. Now she floated inside an escape pod roughly the size of a storage closet. The pod contained air for 72 hours, water for 48, and a single emergency transmitter, which she had already activated. Through the pod's small circular viewport, she could see the debris field. 4 hours ago, that debris had been 40 of the most powerful warships in the Dominion Empire. Now it was twisted metal, drifting slowly in silence. Broken hulls. Shattered engines. Fragments of ships that had once been considered unstoppable. Vina tried very hard not to look at all of it. She was not entirely succeeding. The unknown ship was still out there. Sometimes it drifted close enough to be seen through the viewport, a dark angular shape moving slowly among the wreckage. It was no longer racing forward at impossible speed. Now it moved carefully, almost deliberately, as if examining the battlefield it had created, or searching for something. It had no reason to hurry. It had destroyed the entire battle group in less than 20 minutes. Vina had activated her recording equipment the moment the battle began. She was a sensor officer. Recording things was what she did. But also, some instinct deep inside her had understood almost immediately that what was happening needed to be documented. Even if nobody ever recovered the pod. Even if the air ran out before anyone found her. The record needed to exist. So she watched. She recorded. And she tried to understand what she had witnessed. The battle, if it could even be called that, had not begun the way battles normally began. Battle Group Harris had located the unknown vessel exactly where predictive models said it would be, crossing the midpoint of the Veil corridor at a steady pace. The ship had been easy to detect. It wasn't hiding. It wasn't even trying. In fact, it was broadcasting something. A repeating signal across multiple frequencies. The same pattern. Over and over again. The fleet's communication analysts had not been able to decode it in time, but the pattern was unmistakably deliberate. It was meant to be heard. Admiral Harris had ignored it. His orders were clear. Stop the vessel before it reached inhabited space. The fleet spread out into a standard intercept formation, a wide net designed to cut off any direction of escape. Weapons charged. Target locks established. Vina sat at her sensor station aboard one of the cruisers, watching the unknown vessel on her display. And she noticed something strange. The ship had detected them almost immediately. Yet its course did not change. Its speed did not change. And the broadcast signal continued exactly as before. The same repeating message. Over and over. Right up until the moment Admiral Harris gave the order to fire. The first salvo from 40 Dominion warships was overwhelming. Plasma lances from the heavy cruisers struck with enough energy to melt a small moon. Mass driver rounds from destroyers screamed through space at a fraction of light speed. Graviton bombs, one of the Dominion's most devastating weapons, detonated in a wide pattern meant to tear apart the entire length of the enemy vessel. Every weapon struck. Vina confirmed it on her sensors. Every single shot connected. The unknown ship continued moving. Not unchanged. Her sensors showed massive heat blooms across its hull. Structural stress rippled along its armor. The weapons had hurt it. But the ship did not slow. It did not break apart. It did not behave like any ship should when struck by the combined firepower of 40 warships. Then there was a pause. 11 seconds. During those 11 seconds, the broadcast signal stopped, and the unknown vessel responded. Vina did not have full footage of what happened next. Her ship took its first hit almost immediately, damaging much of the recording equipment. But the sensors still captured something. And what the data showed was enough to explain how 40 warships disappeared in less than 20 minutes. Vina had numbers. Her recording systems had captured partial visual footage from the external cameras before they went dark. She also had audio from the bridge crew that lasted until the exact moment the bridge itself was hit. What the unknown ship had done was not chaotic. It had not fired wildly the way the Dominion fleet had. It had not tried to hit everything at once. Instead, it had selected targets one at a time with a level of precision that was almost uncomfortable to watch on the sensor display. Heavy cruisers first. The most powerful ships in the formation. The ones that posed the greatest threat. Then the destroyers. Then the frigates. Methodical. Efficient. There was no panic in the firing pattern. No anger. No frantic bursts of desperate combat. It looked like the firing pattern of a crew simply doing their job. The Dominion battle group lasted 19 minutes and 40 seconds. When the final Dominion ship went dark, the unknown vessel stopped firing immediately. Not gradually. Not slowly winding down. Immediately. Like someone flipping off a switch. The guns simply stopped. And the ship continued forward at the same steady pace it had maintained from the beginning. Then the broadcast signal resumed. The same repeating pattern. The same message. As if nothing had happened. Vina was watching through the small viewport of her escape pod when the unknown ship passed close enough that she could finally see it clearly without instruments. She pressed her face against the glass like a curious child peering through a window. Even terrified. Even alone. Even knowing she might die out here. She was still a sensor officer. And curiosity was stronger than fear. Up close, the ship was even larger than the sensor readings had suggested. It filled almost her entire field of view. She could see the repairs she had noticed earlier in the briefing images. Mismatched hull plates. Old damage that had been patched over again and again. There were sections of the hull where she could count 4 distinct layers of repairs, each overlapping the previous one. This ship had been through many battles. And every time it had been damaged, someone had repaired it and sent it back out. Vina tried to estimate the age of one of the larger repair patches. Judging by the material degradation and plating style, it might have been older than the Dominion's current ruling dynasty. That thought had barely formed when something happened that completely stole the air from her lungs. A port opened along the side of the ship. Not a weapons port. Something else. And suddenly, a voice came through her communicator. Not through the pod's simple emergency beacon receiver. Through the full communication system. Which meant the ship had somehow identified the beacon's frequency and deliberately targeted it. The voice spoke in a language she did not understand. It was clearly a recording. The same few seconds repeated over and over in a loop, just like the broadcast signal the fleet had detected earlier. But this message was different. This one was directed specifically at her pod. They knew she was there. After the unknown language message repeated 3 times, something changed. Her communicator screen flickered, and a face appeared. Vina almost dropped the device. It was unlike any face she had ever seen before. The being had 2 forward-facing eyes set into a flat face, with a protruding nose and a wide mouth. Its skin was a pale brown color, and deep lines surrounded its eyes and mouth, lines formed by age, exhaustion, and years spent somewhere harsh. Its hair grew from the top of its head in a way Vina found strange. It was grey, cut short. The being looked directly into the camera. Its expression was difficult to read. Vina had spent 3 years learning to read Dominion facial expressions. Alien ones were something entirely different. But later, long after this moment, she would replay the recording many times and reach a conclusion. The expression was tired. And sad. And extremely careful. like someone trying very hard to ensure the next thing they did was the right thing. The being spoke again. The words were unfamiliar. Then the message changed. The voice became mechanical. What followed was clearly a translation attempt. Rough. Broken. Clearly assembled from fragments of Dominion language captured from the border cruiser and the battle group's transmissions. The translated message came through slowly. We speak. No more fight. We are far from home. We are lost. We want talk. We want go home. Then the face returned. The same tired, careful expression. And finally one more word. The being spoke it slowly, as if it were the most important thing they could possibly say. Alone. A pause. Then one final word. Please. The transmission ended. Vina sat in the darkness of her escape pod, surrounded by the drifting wreckage of 40 warships. She stared at the blank communicator screen for a long time. Then she did her job. She checked her recording systems. Every second of the battle had been captured. Sensor data. Visual recordings. Audio logs. Everything. She packaged the entire record into the highest priority emergency transmission format the pod could produce. Then she added her own report. Her voice was steady, precise, and professional as she described exactly what she had witnessed. She included the battle footage, the sensor logs, the alien face, the translated message, and the final word. Then she transmitted everything toward Dominion space. She knew it would take time to arrive. She knew she might not survive long enough to know if anyone ever received it. But she hoped that when someone eventually read her report, they would pay attention to all of it. Not just the part about 40 destroyed warships. All of it. Inside the UNSC warship Adamantine Resolve, the atmosphere was quiet. But it was not celebratory. Captain Ala Voss stood at the central command console of the bridge, studying the damage report on her screen. Her expression revealed nothing. Around her, the crew moved with the calm efficiency of people who had survived worse and understood how to keep working even when things were bad. The bridge of the Resolve was purely functional. No decorations. No unnecessary displays. Every surface existed for a purpose. It looked exactly like what it was, the working environment of a ship that had been deployed for a very long time. Breach in Section 7 sealed, the damage control officer reported. Hull integrity holding at 83% overall. Reactor 2 shows minor fluctuation but remains within acceptable range. We lost 3 external sensor arrays on the port side. He paused briefly. Minor casualties in engineering. Nothing life-threatening. Voss listened without interrupting. When the report ended, she nodded once. Get me a full list of expended munitions, she said calmly. Mac rounds. Archer missiles. Everything. I want exact numbers. Yes, Captain. She turned to the communications officer. The pod. Did we get a response? No verbal response, Captain, the officer replied. But the beacon is still transmitting. Whoever is inside is alive. He tapped his console. We received confirmation our message was received. The beacon's frequency shifted slightly after our transmission. Manual adjustment. Voss nodded again. They heard us. She walked toward the observation window along the side of the bridge. Outside, the debris field drifted silently through space. Fragments of ships they had destroyed slowly tumbling in darkness. She watched it for a long moment. Her senior officers said nothing. They knew her well enough to let her have that moment. She had not wanted to fight. She had broadcast messages on every frequency the incoming fleet had used. She had continued broadcasting the entire time the fleet approached. She had kept broadcasting right until the first weapon struck. She had given them every chance. She always did. Avoid the fight if possible. Fight only when there was no other option. But sometimes, there was no other option. She turned away from the window. Navigator, she said. Where are we? The navigator, a young man named Obi, pulled up the stellar map. Best current estimate, Captain, approximately 2.3 million light-years from home. He zoomed the map out further. We're in a completely different galaxy from ours. Smaller than the Milky Way, but old. Very old. He hesitated. The slipspace anomaly that brought us here isn't something I can reproduce. I've been searching for a way back for 22 months. I don't have one yet. Voss looked at him calmly. Are you still looking? Every day, Captain. Good, she said. Keep looking. She stepped back to the center of the bridge. Senior staff meeting in 10 minutes. We need to decide where we go from here. She paused briefly. Someone in this galaxy must be willing to sit down and talk. We just have to find them. She said it the way she said most things. Not hopeful. Not dramatic. Just a simple conclusion she had reached. Her first officer, Riku, fell into step beside her as she walked toward the briefing room. They outnumbered us 40-1, he said quietly. They did, she replied. And they still lost. Yes, Riku said. And that's exactly why the next fleet they send will be much larger. Riku was quiet for a moment. Do you think they'll send more? Captain Ala Voss glanced at him. I think they'll send a lot more, she said calmly. Which is why we need to be speaking to someone with authority before the next fleet arrives. She pushed open the door to the briefing room. Because I genuinely do not want to do that again. She took her seat at the head of the table and pulled up the star charts on the room's display. Outside, in the darkness of the Veil corridor, the wreckage continued to drift. And somewhere among that drifting debris, inside a small escape pod, a young sensor officer with shaking hands was transmitting everything she had witnessed back toward the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Grand Admiral Sarah Khan would receive that report in approximately 18 hours. He would read it 4 times. But the word at the end, the single translated word, would stay with him longer than anything else in the report. Please. Not a threat. Not a declaration. Not the word of a conqueror. Just a very tired crew, a very long way from home, asking for a chance to talk. Khan simply wasn't sure whether the Empire would give them that chance. The Imperial Senate of the Dominion had not seen a session like this in 400 years. The chamber itself had been designed to impress. The ceiling rose so high above the floor that the upper galleries sometimes disappeared into natural mist on humid days. The seats curved in a vast arc around the central speaking floor, tiered so that every senator could see every other senator, and the speaker standing at the center could see them all. The walls were carved from white stone quarried from a moon that no longer existed, destroyed long ago during a weapons test. Everything about the room communicated one message. The people who built this place were the most powerful beings in the known universe. And they had been for a very long time. Today, many of those powerful people looked frightened. Not all of them showed it the same way. Some expressed fear through anger. Some through denial. Others sat silently, pale and motionless, contributing nothing. But the fear was there. Vena's report had been classified at the highest level. Yet in the Dominion Empire, as in every large political structure that had ever existed, classified information had a habit of spreading quickly among the people who mattered. 40 warships destroyed in 20 minutes. The number moved through the chamber like a cold wind. Senators whispered it to each other. They wrote it on data slates and passed them down the rows. Some spoke it aloud in disbelief. Others in outrage. And some in something quieter. Something closer to genuine fear. Grand Admiral Sarah Khan stood at the central speaker's platform and delivered his report with the same steady voice he always used. He presented the facts without embellishment. Sensor data. Fragments of translated communications. Vena's testimony. The enlarged image of the unknown vessel appeared on the massive display behind him so every senator could see it clearly. The scarred hull. The mismatched armor plates. The strange markings they still could not fully translate. He answered questions for 2 hours. Most of the questions were the kind powerful people asked when they were afraid but trying not to sound afraid. How quickly can we replace the losses? How many ships can we mobilize within a week? What are our largest weapons systems? Have we considered using them? Khan answered every question honestly. Then he waited. He waited to see if anyone would ask the question he believed truly mattered. Senator Lorena Dora asked it. Laureen was 63 years old and had served in the Senate for 31 of those years. She was thin, sharp-eyed, with a face that had once been beautiful but had since become something else, angular, watchful, deeply lined with experience. She dressed simply for a senator. Plain dark clothing. No ceremonial decorations except a small silver pin representing her home district. She was not popular in the Senate. But she was respected. And that was often more useful. Laureen had read Vina's report twice before the session began. Not just the summary. The full report. Including the personal observations. Including the alien face. Including the translated message. She waited until the questions about weapons and fleet strength had finally exhausted themselves. Until the chamber had settled into the uneasy silence that followed too much noise. Then she stepped forward. "I want to talk about the signal," she said. The chamber shifted uneasily. "Before Admiral Harris opened fire," she continued, "the unknown vessel was broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Our analysts confirmed this. The message repeated on a regular cycle. Clearly deliberate. Clearly intended to be received." She paused and turned toward Sarah Khan. "Admiral, has that message now been translated?" Khan nodded slowly. "It was completed this morning." "What does it say?" Another pause. Khan looked out across the chamber. Then he answered plainly. "It says, approximately. We are a vessel from a distant civilization. We have traveled a great distance and are far from home. We have no hostile intent. We wish to communicate peacefully. Please respond." The chamber fell silent. Laureen repeated the final words quietly. "Please respond." She let the silence hang for a moment. "They were asking to talk," she said. "They were asking to talk before we fired a single shot. They were asking to talk the entire time Admiral Harris was arranging his battle formation. And they kept asking, right up until the moment our weapons struck them. Only then," she said calmly, "did they fight back. They destroyed 40 ships," someone shouted from the gallery. Laureen did not even look up. "Yes," she said. "After we fired first. After they spent 40 minutes broadcasting a request for peaceful communication that we chose to ignore. I am not saying they are harmless," she continued. "They clearly are not. I am saying that when we examine the sequence of events honestly, the picture becomes more complicated than simple aggression." The murmuring in the chamber grew louder. She raised her voice slightly. "I want to ask this Senate a serious question. Not about fleet strength. Not about weapons. A different question." She turned and displayed the image of the battered alien ship. "Look at this vessel. Look at the hull. The repairs. The damage cycles. Our analysts estimate it has been traveling through deep space for an extremely long time. Possibly years." She turned back to the chamber. "This is not a scouting vessel preparing an invasion. This is not a warship positioned at the edge of our territory as a show of force. This is a ship that is lost. They said so themselves. We are lost. We want to go home. Please." The silence that followed was different from the one before. Heavier. More thoughtful. "And if I'm wrong," Laureen said quietly, "and this vessel truly is the advance element of a larger armada, then destroying it accomplishes nothing. Because that armada already knows where we are." She stepped back. "I am requesting a vote to suspend the military response and attempt formal communication with the unknown vessel." The vote failed. Not by a large margin. But it failed. 41 senators to 37, with 9 abstentions. Fear had outweighed caution. Too many senators thought like soldiers rather than diplomats. And too many who might have voted differently were afraid of the emperor. Emperor Velthanus IV had not attended the session in person. He was 94 years old and rarely left the inner palace. But his influence was present everywhere. In whispered conversations. In messages delivered before the session began. In the simple fact that everyone knew what he wanted. He wanted the vessel destroyed. He wanted the threat eliminated. A man who had ruled for 30 years did not survive by tolerating things he did not understand. And a ship that had destroyed 40 Dominion warships ranked very high on the list of things he refused to tolerate. 3 full battle groups were authorized. 300 warships. The largest military deployment the Dominion had made in 2 centuries. Senator Laureen Adora left the chamber alongside Vel, the young intelligence officer. "They're making a mistake," Vel said quietly. "Yes," Laureen replied. "What do we do?" Laureen glanced sideways at him. "We wait," she said. "And when the mistake becomes obvious to everyone else, we present an alternative." Vel hesitated. "Do you think the vessel can survive 300 ships?" Laureen thought about the scarred hull, the countless repairs, the impossible journey, the tired face on Vina's recording, and the final word, "Please." "I think whatever is on that ship has survived things we cannot imagine," she said slowly. "Whether it can survive 300 ships, I honestly don't know. But even if we destroy it, we will have gained nothing." Meanwhile, 300 warships were already moving. Fleet Admiral Drathvor commanded the fleet from his flagship, Velkara's Judgment, the largest warship in the Imperial fleet. Nearly a kilometer long, armed with weapons capable of cracking a moon. Drathvor had commanded it for 8 years. In those 8 years, it had never fired in anger. Until now. He had studied the battle report carefully. And one detail continued to bother him. The unknown ship had stopped firing the moment the last Dominion vessel went dark. Instantly. Like a switch. A ship fighting for survival did not behave like that. A ship on an attack run did not behave like that. But a ship that did not want to fight might. Still, his orders were clear. Find the vessel. Destroy it. 6 hours before the fleet arrived, the adamantine resolve detected them. The sensor advantage of being alone in deep space was significant. The ship's long-range scanners could track objects hundreds of millions of kilometers away. At first, it appeared as a single contact. Then more. Then dozens. The computer updated the count continuously. 300. And still increasing. Captain Ala Voss arrived on the bridge within minutes. She studied the display silently. Then she called for all senior staff. They gathered quickly. And when she finished explaining the situation, the bridge grew quiet. Not panic, but the tense stillness of people performing calculations that had no comfortable answers. Finally, Voss spoke. She told them what she intended to do. Her first officer Riku stared at her for a moment. "You want to hold position?" "Yes," she replied. "Power down weapons?" Riku asked. "Not entirely," Captain Ala Voss replied. "Standby only. But yes, essentially." Riku stared at her. "Against 300 ships?" "Yes." Silence filled the bridge. Riku glanced at the sensor display and then back at her. He had a quality Voss valued deeply in a first officer. He thought before he argued, and when he did argue, it was because he had a real point to make. "We have enough Mach rounds and missiles for maybe one more engagement at the scale of the last one," he said carefully. "Maybe. After that we're down to point defense and maneuvering." "I know. So if this doesn't work?" "If this doesn't work," Voss said calmly, "we fight." She paused. "And we probably lose." Another quiet moment passed across the bridge. "But we've known for a long time that getting home wasn't going to be easy," she continued. "Dying in a fight with 300 alien warships was always within the range of possibilities when we accepted this mission." She looked around the bridge at her crew. "What I'm not willing to do is start a fight when we don't have to." "We tried talking before," someone said quietly. "They didn't let us," Voss replied. "We're going to try again." She paused. "Any objections?" There were none. There was unease in the room. No one liked the plan, but no one objected. They were professionals, and more importantly, they trusted their captain. Every one of them had been thinking the same thing. The last fight had not been what any of them wanted. And repeating it on a scale 7 times larger might be something many of them wouldn't survive. "Obi," Voss said. "What's the current status of your translation database?" "Navigator Obi," who had been the second busiest person on the ship for nearly 2 years after the captain herself, pulled up a display. "We recovered a large amount of communication data from the last engagement," he explained. "My language algorithms have been running continuously. I can now produce rough but functional translations in their primary language. About 60% comprehension accuracy." He hesitated slightly. "It's not perfect, but it's enough for a real conversation." Voss studied him for a moment. "Good," she said quietly. Then she nodded once. "Prepare a broadcast." "I'll write it." "We begin transmitting the moment they're within communication range." The broadcast went out 4 hours later. Captain Voss had written it herself with Obi's help. She had rewritten it 6 times before she was satisfied. She wanted it clear without sounding weak, honest without sounding threatening. She wanted whoever heard it to understand exactly what they were dealing with. Not a ship begging for mercy. Not a ship making threats. Just a crew making a reasonable choice. The message said, "This is the UNSC warship Adamantine Resolve. We know you are coming. Our sensors have detected your fleet. We are not running. We are not preparing to fire. Our weapons are powered to minimum standby levels only. We are holding our position. We arrived in this region by accident. We are far from our home galaxy and have been searching for a way back for nearly 2 years. We claim no territory here. We want nothing from you except the chance to speak and, if possible, assistance in finding a path home. We fought the last fleet only after they fired on us following 40 minutes of unanswered communication requests. We did not enjoy that outcome. We do not want to fight again. We are one ship. One crew. And we have people aboard who want to go home to their families. We are waiting. Please talk to us." Voss recorded the message in her own voice. The translation system converted it into Dominion language. Then the ship broadcast the message on every available frequency, repeating it every 10 minutes. And they waited. The Adamantine Resolve sat motionless in space. Across the ship, the crew maintained quiet readiness. In the mess hall, people ate in silence. In engineering, technicians monitored the reactor continuously. In the medical bay, the ship's doctor quietly inventoried supplies. In navigation, Obi continued running calculations he had been running for 22 months. He did it because the captain had told him to keep searching, and because accepting that they might never find their way home was something he simply refused to do. On the bridge, Captain Voss drank coffee and watched the approaching fleet on her display. Fleet Admiral Drathvor received the transmission 2 hours before arrival. He listened to it twice. Then he sat very still. His bridge crew recognized that silence immediately. It meant the Admiral was thinking, and when he was thinking, no one interrupted. He pulled up the battle report from the Harris engagement again. He examined the timeline. The 40 minutes of ignored communication attempts. The immediate ceasefire when the last Dominion ship was disabled. Then he compared it with the sensor readings coming from the Adamantine Resolve. Stationary. Weapons powered down. Exactly as the message claimed. A ship preparing to attack 300 warships would never behave like that. It would charge every weapon it had. It would search for the most advantageous moment to strike. It would not sit still and broadcast its position. Drathvor called his senior staff. The opinions were divided. His weapons officer believed the message was a trap. His intelligence officer thought it might be genuine, but irrelevant. Their orders were clear. Destroy the vessel. Finally, his second-in-command, Korath, spoke. Admiral, we have 300 ships. They have 1. If this is a trick, we have enough strength to handle it. But if it's not a trick... He paused. And we fire anyway. We will have destroyed a vessel that asked to speak. After they asked once already, and we answered with 40 warships. He looked directly at the Admiral. I'm not sure which possibility concerns me more. When the fleet arrived, 300 Dominion warships surrounded the lone human vessel. A complete sphere of ships. Every weapon charged. Every targeting computer locked. An overwhelming display of military power. And in the center of that sphere, the adamantine resolve remained perfectly still. It did not move. It did not charge its weapons. It simply continued broadcasting the same message. And waited. Fleet Admiral Drathvor studied the image of the battered ship on his display. Then he pressed the communicator. "Open a channel," he said. "All frequencies. Translation active. And record everything." A moment later the channel opened. Drathvor looked again at the lonely vessel surrounded by 300 warships. It looked like a very old animal that had wandered into a place it didn't belong and simply refused to run. And for reasons he could not fully explain, he did not want to fire on it. "This is Fleet Admiral Drathvor of the Imperial Dominion," he said calmly. "I have received your transmission. I have reviewed the record of your previous communication with our forces." He paused. "My orders are to destroy your vessel." Another pause. "I'm going to deviate from those orders in one respect. I'm going to speak with you first." He waited through the transmission delay. "Tell me about yourself. Tell me where you come from. Tell me honestly what you are doing here. I am listening." 7 seconds passed. Then a reply came. The voice was rough, tired, but unmistakably honest. "My name is Captain Alavos. We come from a galaxy called the Milky Way, approximately 2.3 million light-years from here. We entered a spatial anomaly 22 months ago that brought us here by accident. And we have been searching for a way home ever since." She paused. "We are a crew of 263 people. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, a medical team, and a navigator who hasn't slept properly in almost 2 years trying to find a path back." Another pause. "We did not come here to harm anyone. We do not want your territory. We do not understand your politics. And we have no interest in your wars. We want navigational data that might help us find a slipspace anomaly leading back toward our own galaxy. Then we want to go home." The Dominion flagship bridge was completely silent. "I understand you have 300 warships surrounding us," Voss continued. "And I understand those ships have orders to destroy us. I'm asking you personally to consider another option." Her voice remained steady, professional, but the weight behind the words was impossible to miss. "My crew has families, children, parents waiting at home who don't know what happened to us. We just want to go home, Admiral. That's the beginning and the end of it." The channel went quiet. Drathvor said nothing for nearly 30 seconds. Finally he spoke again. "Captain Voss, I am going to ask my fleet to stand down from weapons-ready status. This is not an order I am authorized to give. And I will almost certainly answer for it. But I am giving it." He paused. "I would like to continue this conversation. There are people in my government who need to hear what you just told me. If you can give me patience, I will do everything in my authority to ensure you receive a fair hearing." 7 seconds passed. Then Voss's voice returned. "Thank you, Admiral. We're not going anywhere." But 4 hours later, a new order arrived from the Imperial Palace. Fleet Admiral Drathvor was instructed to resume his original orders immediately. The vessel was to be destroyed. Any delay would be considered insubordination. A replacement commander was already being dispatched. Drathvor read the order. Then he quietly set it aside and returned to speaking with Captain Voss. Laureen had not left the Senate district since the failed vote. She had turned her office into a temporary command center, sleeping in a chair beside her communication terminals because she didn't want to miss anything important. Vel stayed with her most of the time. The young intelligence officer had taken leave he hadn't used in nearly 2 years, and together they studied every report, every message, and every fragment of information that might lead to a solution that didn't end with 300 warships destroying a ship that didn't deserve to be destroyed. Vina visited them on the second day. The young sensor officer had already endured 14 hours of military intelligence debriefing after being rescued. Afterward, she had been placed on administrative leave. Not quite punishment, but clearly not trust either. The officials who questioned her had made it clear, if not directly stated, that her personal observations were not relevant to the military analysis. Vina disagreed. If the military didn't think those observations mattered, perhaps someone else would. So she sat across from Senator Lorena Dora and told her everything she had seen. Not just the sensor data already recorded in her report. The other things. The way the alien ship moved after the battle, slowly and carefully, like something tired. The broadcast signal that had continued even while the Dominion fleet prepared to attack. The face that appeared on her communicator. And the final word. Please. Lorene listened without interrupting. When Vina finished, the senator sat silently for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "You made the right choice coming here." On the third day, Fleet Admiral Drathvor's transmission arrived. Lorene read the entire message carefully. All of it. The 4 hours of conversation between Drathvor and Captain Alavos. Every question. Every answer. The story of a ship that had traveled impossibly far and was desperately trying to find its way home. She read the report once quickly. Then she read it again slowly. Then she went back to the Senate. The second Senate session felt very different from the first. Lorene distributed Drathvor's transmission to every senator before the meeting began. And the effect was immediate. A simple military report about an alien vessel destroying 40 warships was one thing. But 4 hours of conversation with a lost crew asking for help was something else entirely. Vina was brought in as a witness. Standing at the speaker's platform, she answered questions calmly and precisely, the way a censor officer reported facts. But these facts were different. She described the alien face on the communicator. She described the broadcast signal that had gone unanswered before the battle. She described the moment she sat alone in an escape pod surrounded by wreckage, listening to an alien voice say please through broken translation software. The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. Another factor had changed the atmosphere as well. The Emperor was absent. Official reports claimed Emperor Velthanus IV was ill, not seriously, but enough to keep him confined within the inner palace. His influence was still present. But without him physically in the chamber, the senators felt slightly freer to think for themselves. When it was finally her turn, Lorene stepped forward. She spoke calmly, without drama. "We have a choice," she said. "We can destroy this vessel." Fleet Admiral Drathvor's forces are already in position. If we relieve him and appoint a commander who follows orders without hesitation, the ship will be gone before nightfall. 263 people who only want to go home will be dead. She paused. And somewhere in another galaxy, the civilization that built that ship will eventually realize it never returned. And when they come looking for it, she let the silence linger. They will know exactly what kind of people we are. She looked around the chamber. Or we can do something the Dominion has never done in 6,000 years. We can allow a vessel to leave our territory peacefully. We can give them the navigational data they need to find their way home. And we can show the galaxy, this one and the one they came from, that when the Dominion encountered something powerful, unknown, and alone, we chose to ask questions first. Another pause. "That is not weakness," she said firmly. "It is strength. The kind that lasts." The vote was close. 44 to 39. 5 abstentions. But it was enough. 6 hours later, the official order reached Fleet Admiral Drathvor. The destruction order was suspended. He was authorized, under strict conditions, to continue communication and pursue a provisional agreement. Drathvor immediately informed Captain Voss. There was a pause after his transmission, longer than the signal delay required. When her voice returned, it remained professional. But he could hear the breath beneath it, the breath of someone who had been holding tension for a very long time. "Thank you, Admiral," she said. "Tell me what you need from us." The negotiations lasted 3 days. They were conducted between Voss and Drathvor, with Senator Lorene's office participating through relay communication. Navigator Obi served as the primary translator and technical liaison. The talks were not easy. There were deep cultural differences between humanity and the Dominion. More than once the conversation stalled completely, but they kept talking. And every time they encountered an obstacle, they searched for a way around it rather than forcing their way through. Eventually they reached an agreement. The Dominion would provide the adamantine resolve with detailed navigational charts of the galaxy. These charts would finally give Obi's calculations the missing context he had needed for nearly 2 years. They would also share data on known spatial anomalies, regions where slipspace distortions occurred. One of those locations might allow the ship to return home. In exchange, humanity's first contact with the Dominion would be recorded officially as peaceful. It was Laureen who insisted on that detail, because she understood how history was written, and how much the first story mattered. The day before the Resolve departed, Captain Voss made one final request. She asked for a direct visual conversation with Admiral Drathvor, face to face. Drathvor agreed. His bridge crew gathered around the communication screen. Most of them had never seen a human before. When the screen activated, they saw Captain Voss seated at her command station with members of her crew standing behind her. They were different from each other in ways the Dominion officers found fascinating. Different heights, different skin tones, different ages. They looked like a crew that had spent a long time traveling far from home. Tired, but quietly hopeful. For the first time since their conversations began, Drathvor saw something different on Voss's face. A smile. Small, but real. "I wanted to say thank you," she said. "I thought it might mean more if you could see the face saying it." She paused. "I know what you risked to make this decision. I know you had orders. And I know what it can cost a person to disobey them." She looked directly into the camera. "You did something brave." Drathvor took a moment before replying. "You did something braver," he said. "Sitting still while 300 ships surrounded you. Not fighting. Waiting. That is harder than fighting." Voss smiled faintly. "We've had a lot of practice." The adamantine Resolve departed the following morning. The 300 Dominion warships opened a corridor through their formation. The lone human vessel passed slowly between them, then accelerated into deep space. Drathvor watched it on his display until it became too small to see. Finally the ship activated its drive. Space twisted. A bright flash distorted the stars. And the Resolve vanished. Somewhere far away, hopefully closer to home, Drathvor soon received a message from the Emperor's office. It was not pleasant. It detailed his insubordination, his violation of direct orders, his unauthorized communication with the Senate, and informed him that a formal review board awaited him upon his return to Velkara. He listened quietly, then said only, "Acknowledge receipt." Later, his communications officer asked carefully, "Admiral, should we report this as a victory?" Drathvor thought about the tired human captain. The word please. The choice that had been made. "Report it as a warning," he said quietly. "To ourselves. About what we almost did." In the Senate archives, Senator Laureen Adora filed the complete record of the event. Not just the battle. Everything. The ignored signal. The plea for communication. The conversation between two commanders who chose to listen. Because she believed something important had happened. Not just a political decision. Something larger. Somewhere, in another galaxy, people had sent a ship on a journey so long and difficult that finding the way home took years of effort. And when that ship was surrounded and outnumbered, its crew had chosen to wait, to speak, to ask. And eventually, someone had listened. Far away between galaxies, the adamantine Resolve raced through space. Captain Alla Voss sat in her command chair watching unfamiliar stars pass across the screen. Different stars than the ones she had grown up with. Different stars than the ones she had navigated by for most of her career. But stars nonetheless. For Voss, the universe had always been something to explore, not something to fear. Behind her, Obi worked tirelessly at his station. He hadn't slept in over 30 hours. Dominion navigational charts covered multiple displays. His calculations filled the others. Finally he looked up. "Captain, I think I found it." The bridge fell silent. "There's an anomaly about 4 months from our current position," he said. "Slip space activity." The Dominion charts describe the region as unstable. He smiled tiredly. "If I'm reading this correctly, that's a door home." After 2 years, for months suddenly felt like nothing. Voss looked around the bridge at her crew. Every person there had survived the impossible journey. She nodded once. "Set course." And the adamantine resolve continued into the darkness, toward home.